Hello, everyone. This is Kerry Oceans with the U.S. Composting Council. I'm here to welcome you to today's webinar. We just launched the webinar. We're seeing people log in, so we're just going to give another minute as people can log in from wherever they are, and we'll be getting started. This is the second in our series of composting in the time of COVID-19. While we're letting people get logged in, we're just about at the 200 mark. Really great turnout for today. So a little bit about us as folks are coming in. We are the U.S. Composting Council. We're a trade and professional association working to advance the composting industry. And we do that because we believe composting is an essential process. So we believe I'm not going to read this to you, but our tagline, "Compost Nature's Way to Grow," is really encapsulates what we believe. Coming up here on International Compost Awareness Week in a few weeks, at the beginning of May, so we'll be doing lots of stuff around that. A little bit of housekeeping here. As everyone logs in and joins the webinar, you'll automatically be on mute. That's to keep the sound quality decent, especially for today. We will be having multiple presenters unmuted at the same time. There is a Q&A box, so please go ahead and submit your questions to that. And some I'll be able to answer as we go. Some we will ask to the speakers, and some may be deferred to a later webinar if appropriate. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand at our website, compostingcouncil.org. You can see if you go to our website, look for the Research and Educate tab. Right at the top of the list, there are the COVID-19 resources, and you'll find a link to all the webinars at that place. As I said, this is the second in our series of webinars. The first one was done last week and really reviewed the virus, some of the real biology of the virus and how its likelihood of surviving under various conditions. And you can find the recording to that on that same website. We've got 2 more scheduled now, and we may be adding others. But for now, we've got 2 more next week, navigating COVID-19 for small scale food scrap collectors. So these are both if you're doing drop off, if you're doing collection, especially for community composters, this webinar will really focus on that aspect of it. A lot of the questions that have been submitted relate to the collection side. How do you keep containers clean? How do you keep your workers clean? Workers safe and healthy, and so on the collection side. So come back next week to hear the answers to those questions. And then lastly, right before Earth Day, we'll be talking about the reemergence of the Victory Garden and selling compost to all the folks who are sheltering in place. So come back for that one. So today we are joined by 4 leaders from around the country. I'm going to briefly introduce each one, and then they will have a chance to talk a little bit about their operations before we get into the Q&A for today. So Brian Fleury will be up first. Brian is Senior Vice President with We Care Denali, a division of Denali Water Solutions, LLC. He'll tell you about what they do. Brian's been with We Care for 17 years in various roles, including sales and marketing, operations, project development. Right now, he's overseeing the large-scale composting facilities, including the New York City Department of Sanitation's composting facilities at the Rockland County Solid Waste Management Authority's facility in-vessel co-composting operation. That's a mouthful. He's a graduate of SUNY Oswego and vice president of the U.S. Composting Council. Go ahead, Brian. We'll unmute you.
Hey, Carrie, I had to unmute for a second. Yes. So it's actually, I'm in my 20th year with We Care Denali now, and time flies. So, so just a little bit on We Care Denali. We were previously, a lot of people knew us as We Care Organics or Denali Water Solutions, two different companies that merged back in 2016. What Carrie just put up on the screen is a bit of the history of where both We Care and Denali, their history, but really focusing on 2016 to the present is where We Care Denali really came into play, where we merged, and to bring the beneficial reuse Class A our strong suit at We Care Organics into the Denali business. And so that's when we formed We Care Denali, and we brought along our We Care product line of We Care Compost, We Care Mulches, and We Care Soils. Next slide, Carrie. Just to give you a little bit of to show where, We Care was primarily in the Northeast. We did have an operation in Michigan as well, but that's where we were primarily located. But now, as We Care Denali, we have our reach is through most of the United States, from coast to coast, and so this just kind of gives you an update or an idea of how many states we currently do business in. The next slide will show you our composting and mulching and soil operations. We're still primarily, really, most of our operations are on the East Coast, but we do have operations also in Ann Arbor and Phoenix, Arizona. These are just, all of these sites are just composting or composting, mulching, and soil blending operations. 16 of them in total. Just to give you a good idea of just how many sites we have to deal with right now through the pandemic. In addition, a lot of our clients are municipal clients. So we have some facilities that we own and operate ourselves, and then we have a majority of our operations, our composting operations, are public-private partnerships that we have long-term contracts with. Some of our contracts include with the New York City Department of Sanitation, Rockland County Solid Waste Management Authority, City of Phoenix, City of Ann Arbor, as examples. So that'll later on. And then in addition, we operate many different types of composting technologies, from traditional outdoor windrow to indoor and outdoor ASP, and what we call agitated bed, which are in-vessel systems with full odor control systems attached to them. And so we'll later on, when we get into the Q&A, I can discuss some of the challenges that the different types of operations in the different regions and with the municipal clients all pose for us, and how we're dealing with those.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Just one quick question came in actually for you. Do you partner with New York City's Department of Environmental Protection to import sludge from water resource recovery facilities for beneficial use? So I guess, are you?
So we do. So we doesn't have anything to do with our composting contract that we have in the city, but we do have multiple other contracts with New York City DEP. They're separate divisions, and so We used to have a composting contract with them, and currently we do not. We have a digester cleanout contract with DEP at this time, where we go in and we actually clean their digesters.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Brian. And just one question about what ASP, that stands for Aerated Static Pile System, and those are systems that use forced air, either blowing air up from the bottom or pulling air down through from the top to the bottom to do the composting in place versus using a turned windrow system. Okay, next up we have Justin Garrity. Justin is with Veteran Compost. He's the president there. He's been collecting organics in the Baltimore, Washington region, first at a facility in Aberdeen, Maryland, and later expanded to a farm in Northern Virginia. Is currently developing 2 more facilities to serve the region. He has a Bachelor of Science from Worcester Polytechnic Institute and an MBA from Penn State University. Justin?
Thanks. We're a little bit smaller than we care, so not as many slides to review, not as many moving pieces. But the gist of our company is we're vertically integrated, so we both collect and compost, and there are advantages and disadvantages to that. But we built our first compost pile in July of 2010. We also use positive ASP, as do a lot of food waste composting facilities. Our main facility is in Aberdeen, Maryland, where we've been for the last 10 years. We operate a smaller facility in Fairfax, Virginia, and a third facility that's under construction in Lothian, Maryland, which has been going on for about 5 years now, trying to get the permits in place for that. But I expect that to open this summer. So we've grown from 1 employee, me, to 27 full-time employees. And we'll get into that probably later in the questions, but we're going to maintain that throughout this situation. We collect and compost food scraps. So we service residential, office, and commercial customers, everything from 7-gallon buckets on people's doorsteps all the way up to, roll off and tractor trailer quantities for customers. In terms of products, we produce obviously compost. We do some worm composting operations. And then we're getting more and more into soil mixes, things like raised bed mixes. We started doing some biochar this past winter and things like that. So that's the quick rundown on us.
Thank you, Justin. Next up, we've got Laura Hinchcliffe. And you'll see in this, we really have representatives from different parts of the country and also different scales, from fairly large, complex multi-facilities to single operations or smaller operations. So I think you'll get a good variety of answers from these folks. So next up will be Laura Hinchcliffe from Living Earth. Laura is the Municipal Solutions Manager at Living Earth. She leads partnering with municipalities to design and execute sustainable solutions for municipal diversion of green material and commercial diversion of vegetative food scraps. Laura is a SWANA certified manager of composting programs and a Texas certified nursery professional. She serves as chairperson of the Houston Galveston Area Council Solid Waste Management Committee and is a member of the North Central Texas Council of Governments Resource Conservation Committee. Okay, Laura.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it, and I really appreciate USCC putting this together today so we can all, as a community of composters, support each other during these very interesting times. Living Earth started off a little over 30 years ago, 1985, with one location in Houston, Texas, and over the years we have grown to about 33 sites between Texas and Tennessee. As we've grown, we have the pictures there of those different operations with the blue trucks. We do work with a number of municipalities, City of Houston, managing their green waste, and also all the compostable yard waste for the city. And we've built on that model to partner with other municipalities in the Texas and Tennessee market. We can go ahead and go to the next slide, Carrie. So to give you an idea of our footprint, again, when we start off in Texas, in Houston, we've built out to about 10 facilities in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, and 2 facilities in the Central Texas market, and about 14 facilities in the South Texas, Houston, and East Texas marketplace. And the way that we design our footprint is to be accessible to landscape contractors to reduce their time traveling to dispose of their green waste, and also to accommodate and the convenience for our municipal contracts for drop-off. In addition to our municipal and landscape contractors that we work with, we also have a model in which we operate compost facilities at landfills, at co-located facilities at landfills in Texas, which also gives the opportunity for the cities and our landscape customers to have an alternative to dispose of their green waste instead of it being landfilled. So again, you're going to have a lower tipping fee versus landfilling to dispose of those materials. And in addition to that, we also contract with some commercial operators and waste haulers. A lot of times we may not be directly contract with the generator of the waste. Sometimes it's with the hauler. So in addition to the city brush and municipal disposal, we also work with some large commercial generators of produce. And so we don't take in the post-consumer food waste, but several of our sites are authorized, and we do take in the pre-consumer. So on the next slide, a couple of years ago, we expanded in the Tennessee market, and what was attractive to us in that marketplace, again, was the opportunity to have the partnerships and contracts with with some of the metro areas, Knoxville, Nashville, on managing those contracts for the city operations.
Thank you, Laura.
So I think that kind of gives you a general idea. Thanks.
Okay, great. And then last up, we have Pierce Lewis from Dirt Hugger. Pierce is the co-founder of Dirt Hugger, a composting company located in Dalesport, Washington. At Dirt Hugger, he serves as the Swiss Army knife, so focusing on business development, marketing, and finance, but leaving time to run loaders and screen compost. In 10 years, Dirt Hugger has built 2 facilities in 2 states, including a 62,000 ton per year turned aerated static pile facility. Pierce has received BA from University of Virginia, MBA from Oxford, and currently serves on the board of the U.S. Composting Council. All right, Pierce.
Thanks, Carrie, and thanks everybody for listening in today. This is a good time to share. One of my favorite parts of this industry is that we can kind of all share what we're doing and usually not compete too much with each other. This is a picture of our facility. So it's a 13-acre site, turned aerated static pile. The majority of what we accept is residentially collected yard debris with food scraps in it. And then the next largest segment we take is commercial food scraps, which has been interesting lately as it's dried up overnight. We also take whole fruit from packing houses, liquid beer waste, and a few other kind of interesting odd feedstocks. We've got 22 employees. We started in Tyler's backyard, my business partner, 10 years ago, and now we're at this site here. On the product side, we sell about 25,000 yards per year, and it's kind of the full range. About 50% of our material goes into farming operations, so orchards, vineyards, vegetable gardens, and the other half goes into sort of direct retail markets, either through our own yard here or through retailers that we have in Portland and Vancouver, Washington. So the main region we serve is Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver, Washington.
Great, thank you, Pierce. All right, so that's who we've got with you today. I wanted to share a couple. So last week and into this week, we did a survey. The U.S. Composting Council sent a survey to our members to ask them some questions about preparation for today. So we got some good response back, 134. This is as of yesterday. I didn't have a chance to update it today. And you can see a pretty good distribution of types of composters who responded. And I'm just going to share a little bit of data before we get into the first question here. So first question was the topic of this, is composting being viewed as an essential service in what part of the country you're in? And we did have results from all over the country. I didn't share that slide. You can see most people, 70% almost, are continuing to work as usual, but another 15% have had to pause due to the pandemic. And then you see some of the other less frequent results. On the collection side, we are seeing a lot of impacts from COVID, and you'll hear about this from some of the folks today, especially if they're collecting food waste because of all the restaurants being shut down. That's been a big impact on folks that were focusing on that as their business model. The yard waste side, you can see that less of an impact, but still some. And then that's on the collection side. Then on the sale side, I got a couple slides here. One on how has this affected your inventory. So I get about half the people said it's about usual, but some impact on that side, on that end. Staffing has been affected to about half the people. Most have had to reduce some staff. Sorry about that. I've had to reduce some staffing. On the other hand, a few people are still looking for more staff because of increased demand. So with that being said, and that background, I've got three main questions queued up, and then we'll be taking your questions as well. So the first one, as you see here, what changes have you made to the composting operations as a result of the pandemic? And we'll start with Brian.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Yeah, so it's, as we, the first time I got a question on this was from New York City when it first started to happen. Our client, Department of Sanitation, called me up, and I was actually out in Phoenix, still traveling at the time, and was asked, what are you going to do about the coronavirus? I said, I don't know. What are you going to do about it? I go, I'm going to compost it. So but I wasn't really thinking at the time just how big of an impact it was going to have in 1 week from that point to the following week, and just how everybody's lives changed in literally like in 1 week. And so we, like many of the other companies, had to act quickly and put in plans, and not every plan was going to fit every site. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of the different sites, and some of the things that we made changes. At one particular site in Rockland County, the biosolids compost facility. It's a very smooth operation. We only have 5 operators, 2 of which can run the specialized equipment. So instead of having them on the same shift, potentially expose, if one of them got exposed, or that the other one wouldn't be also put into quarantine at the same time, we split their shift. We did that. That's one example, and that's an example of what we put across the board, where if we had specialized types of employees that could only run certain things, that we split them up so that their exposure to one another wouldn't be there, so that just in case there was any sort of exposure and one of them did get or did get ill, that we could backfill that position. Another instance that we had was one of our locations, we split it up into where we work 6 days a week. We split it into 3 12s. So Monday through Wednesday, one shift, 12 hours a day, and then another shift Thursday through Saturday, 12 hours a day. And so what that does is that limits the exposure. The biggest thing that we've been trying to do is limit employee exposure to one another. And I'm sure all of you are doing the same thing across the board, but it's not the easiest thing to do when you have at certain locations where you have one break trailer or one office, break room. And how do you monitor people in and out of there and limit their exposure to one another. So we've had to make, we've had to make schedules and such to limit when people are in the break rooms together and such. So those are some of the other things that we've done. Equipment, one operator per piece of equipment. No jumping into somebody else's piece of equipment to do something without notifying the manager, and then we have to put in a strict decontamination of that particular piece of equipment before another employee gets in that piece of equipment. And then just having people, what we call on the bench. So we had managers, we put some managers in different spots and just have them working from home, that if somebody else gets exposed at a certain location, that we can backfill that position easily. So those are some of the major things that we've done, Carrie.
I think this is Justin. I think I'm next to go here. So the first thing we did when this all started to happen is I think there was a lot of stress in the lives of our employees. So I put out a memo for all our employees that we were going to keep everybody on at full pay, full hours. We were offering 2 weeks of PTO for anyone that, got sick or needed to be quarantined. And that we were flexible on scheduling and childcare, because as soon as schools and daycare closed, our guys were out. So that was, I think, the first thing we had to do was just kind of make sure everybody felt like they were being taken care of. Along with that, there's a lot of operational things I'm sure other folks are dealing with. We lost a lot of our pickups from customers like education customers, offices, and restaurants who closed. So we've been consolidating routes to make them more efficient and then finding things for those drivers to do. We're engaging in a lot of maintenance and cleaning activities to keep everybody busy and productive. We've cut back on our inbound material from outside haulers. That's either happened on its own because of the market conditions, or we've just turned stuff away or delayed starting new things, because I want to be prepared that if we do start to lose key people, we have room in the system to deal with material, even if we have less operators. And then finally, we've gone to only asking people to schedule when they're going to pick up material, so no drop-in sales. That's difficult because we've had that policy for 10 years where people can stop by. And so even today, people are still showing up and they still want to use cash and they still keep popping up. So it's a difficult place to deal with that once they actually show up in your driveway. And then some of the other stuff that goes along with it, like spacing and wearing gloves and things like that, along with the coronavirus, we're already doing that at the facility as a part of the composting job, as our guys mostly work independent. And so we've been encouraging that across the site, as everyone just keep their distance, keep their own equipment, like was mentioned earlier, and wear gloves at all times.
Thanks,
And
Justin.
this is
And
Laura.
I'm back. Sorry, sorry for if there was some interruption there. And so, anyways, thanks. Go ahead, Laura.
You bet. So building on what has been discussed, we also implement a number of procedures to protect the safety of our employees and customers. And in addition to that, we expanded our paid time off policy to help address any needs of our employees, help alleviate some of the challenges they might be facing during the COVID-19. If they need to stay home, as far as taking care of other family members, or they have children at home. Obviously, we've been encouraging our employees to stay at home if they're not feeling well or have any kind of symptoms. And if an employee is diagnosed with COVID-19 or is advised by their health care provider or a government official to self-quarantine due to a direct exposure, then they continue to receive pay during that time. That hasn't happened, but those procedures are in place. For those employees that still are coming to the office, we have our operators, we do have ourselves, our customer service reps, and so anybody that comes on site to go to work, we check their temperature when they arrive, and if they have a temperature of 99 degrees or higher, then they're sent home. We're also keeping track of every single employee every day to make sure checking in on their status, if they didn't come in, if they're taking time off because they're not feeling well. We make sure we get that information and track that information on a daily basis. And all those reports go to our safety and compliance manager. All of our locations are disinfected twice daily, and I'm sure anybody that, whether or not you have customers coming up into your site, you know, we still have to be doing that just for the protection of our own employees coming in. In addition to that, when we were looking at other changes to our composting operations, when we started to realize what was coming down the pike, we began to immediately reach out to all of our commercial and municipal contracts to get any kind of indication if they were going to see changes to their collection schedules. And we continue to have weekly communication with those primary points of contact so that we can service their needs, and then also have an idea of if we're going to have any changes to the volume of material coming in. So those are some of the changes and from an operational standpoint that we put into place early last month.
And Pierce?
Yep. So we kind of broke our response into two different categories. So we have sort of outside contact, inside contact. Some of these things is kind of interesting. We have talked about for years, and this really threw it into place. And there are probably some measures that we might not ever drop now. So one of our biggest contacts was all the truckers bringing material in. And we talked for years about having CBs in all of our loaders, because typically a trucker will come in, speak with our front office staff, find out where to go, get tickets, all this other stuff, and then go out. And that would take about 10 minutes per contact. And so by putting CBs in our loaders, having the truckers talk directly to the loader operators, we've dropped about 15 to 20 of those contacts per day. It's freed up office time, and it's just contactless now. So they drop their tickets in a box. So it's saved time and interaction. And that's something we'll probably never go back on now. So that's been a big positive out of this. We also created a drive-up window for customers with plexiglass, and instituted contactless purchasing and payment. So a lot of people are calling online now, driving up, getting loaded, leaving without ever getting out of their truck. So some of those things, which were also customer convenience things we wanted to do in the past, it's really accelerated that. The last sort of outside contact was shipping and receiving. We moved all of that outdoors on a table, so you don't have the UPS and FedEx people and parts delivery people coming in and out of our building all day, because they're kind of going in and out of lots of people's buildings. So isolating that was big for our outside contact. On internal controls, pretty similar stuff, sanitizing schedules. We closed the break room. Tyler, my partner, sewed masks for everybody, stuff like that. And then just one other big sort of operational on the feedstock side is we typically take about 50 tons a day of food waste, so sort of 2 25-ton loads. And we got a call, a couple weeks ago in the middle of this, and they just said there's zero commercial food waste loads coming now. So when every restaurant was closed in Oregon, it just shut off that feedstock stream overnight, which is kind of interesting and weird.
Thank you. Before I go on to the next question, a couple questions came in. I'd like to let anyone who wants to answer. First one, have the panelists made any changes with respect to the pandemic, with respect to how they make the compost? So you, for example, running piles hotter, keeping them longer, more frequent lab testing, anything along those lines, to end product testing?
Carrie, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this is Brian. All of our sites, we follow strict, every one of our sites where we compost is an STA. We follow the STA program, and we follow time and temperature. Seal of testing insurance. Yes, sorry. And we meet time and temperature and follow all testing procedures. So we don't see a need for having to to test more frequently. Now we're handling material, especially on the food waste. We're making sure that our workers are protected fully. But as far as composting and meeting time and temperature, we're pretty convinced that those our normal procedures are going to kill off any of those pathogens. I'm not sure if Carrie might have dropped off. Does anybody else want to go?
Brian, we concur with our operations as well. When we're producing the compost, we're following the guidelines of the self-testing assurance and obviously making sure that all of our employees have the proper protective gear. And then as far as the use of different equipment, we have a dedicated loader at many of our sites that just manage the composting aspect versus the other loaders that are being used to manage the brush that's coming in. So those are some of the things that we continue to enforce.
This is Frank.
Justin or Pierce?
Yeah, Pierce, do you have anything?
Just agreed. The research we read is that it's killed through, normal PFRP. And so we're just sticking with that.
Yep, same for us.
Justin, how about you?
Same thing, just following good PFRP and, good composting practices.
And so everybody understands, PFRP is processed to further reduce pathogens.
Hi, everyone. I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
My internet has just crashed, and challenges of working from home, and I've got 4 other people working at home also. So I think hopefully that will not happen again. Fortunately, the webinar continues even when I'm not on. And I did want to. So if you've asked a question, though, the questions on my screen got wiped out. So you could please resubmit questions. And I just wanted to mention one thing. You may have mentioned this while I was off the air. If you missed last week's webinar, Pat Milner, Dr. Pat Milner from USDA went through how easily the virus is killed at higher temperatures. You've probably seen things about how long the virus lasts on certain, like on plastic or on metal, on stainless steel for up to 3 days at room temperature. But at higher temperatures, especially at composting temperatures, 55, 60 C, it's really killed within minutes. And so there's very, very low chance of, really no chance that the virus can survive the composting process. It's really the focus is on the kind of things you've been hearing about, but in terms of on the incoming side and on really person to person isolation and protection. Let me get my share up again.
Carrie, this is Frank. I have the questions up. A lot of questions are coming in about how handling feedstocks on the way in, picking up feedstocks at the point of generation, and what type of safety procedures are people employing.
Okay, and we're going to have a whole webinar on collection side but since folks are here now, Justin, why don't you talk, since you're probably doing the most direct pickups, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we've, like I said, most of our guys are wearing gloves day to day as it is. We already, on a typical day when we're not having a pandemic, have gloves in all the trucks, both work gloves and nitrile gloves for the guys to use. A lot of our guys have switched to wearing the face masks while they're there, and most of our commercial customers, we're servicing outdoors, very few customers where we're going indoors. In DC, where we run our residential and office and light commercial business, there is some inside work. and those guys are, taking some precautions. But for a lot of our valet waste situations, those are mostly offices, and those are closed at this time. So once again, I would say the majority of our collections are happening outdoors, where there's a no contact transaction, swapping out the bins.
And how do you sterilize those bins when you're, because that was something that we got a lot of questions about.
So our model, for good and bad, and some days it's great, some days it's bad, is we do a 1-for-1 swap. And so all the bins that we collect, once again, on a regular day, not just during a pandemic, we bring back to our facilities where they're emptied, the material sorted, and the bins are washed. And we use a biodegradable sanitizer on all of our bins. So kind of our method, it just so happens, kind of works out in this case, where we are sanitizing the bins at every pickup for the behalf of our customers. And for us, the largest faction of our collection business, I would say probably one of the top 2 or 3 segments that we service is healthcare. And so and probably the smallest is restaurants. So what we've seen is, for a lot of our healthcare customers, business is good, and we've been doing extra pickups or doing additional services for them, and then making sure those bins are all sanitized before they go back to the customer.
Thanks. And so here's some of the responses that we came back from the survey in terms of sanitation practices. And this was, people could choose from a list, so you can see a good variety, and all the different folks are using all the things that you've heard about in different ways. Okay, we're going to go on to our next question. And this side, so now we'll switch from the processing side to the sales side, and how, oops, didn't get adjusted. So have you adjusted kind of how the process of doing sales, how that, some of you already talked about kind of customers, but are there things you might mention about how you've had to change how you actually transact sales, and also what's happening in terms of demand? And we've heard from others around the country that demand is changing. I'd like to hear from you guys. And again, let's start with Brian.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, so we don't, at some of our sites, we don't really deal with much for outside transactions other than with, big semis coming in and dumping material, or packer trucks coming in. But where we have a lot more exposure are our Connecticut and Maryland sites. And at those sites, we have gone to where at some of them, there were customer walk-ins. We stopped all those, the customer walk-ins, and we've gone to window exchange at all of them. And where we either have plexiglass or sliding glass or something to protect our worker. Some of the sites, I think 100% of the sites now, we've gone to no cash, only credit card. And then for deliveries, we've gone to no paper, drop off, just we're taking the sales, dropping the delivery, and no paperwork is exchanged. We sent out emails to all the customers. I mean, some of our customers are large scale commercial customers that in the past had always required a signature for payment. So we had to go back through and, we sent out a mass email to all of our customer base to let them know that due to the virus, we were going to paperless and no signature. And ones that we knew that we might have an issue with, we got written confirmation ahead of time, via email, that they would accept this change during this pandemic, which, it was a concern of ours because, they've used, some of our customers in the past have used it. Hey, you didn't get a signature from our, from the site foreman at the site where, you're not going to get paid for that load. So we had to make sure that we, really got confirmation ahead of time prior to implementing that. So, but, and then at other sites, anywhere where we can limit exposure of our employees with the outside public, we've done it. I think everyone's kind of doing the same thing. That's already touched on it, the other 3 panelists. about the measures they're taking with their employees to protect them with gloves and masks and such. As far as overall product sales, we've seen a decrease specifically in the commercial side, which is where they've shut down construction projects that are non-essential in many of the states in which we operate. And so with that has decreased a lot of the sales that we had going out for mulching and the engineered soils and compost. So we have, over the last 2 weeks, seen a decline in revenue versus what we had budgeted because of the ruling put out that non-essential construction was to cease. So at first we didn't see that because they were allowing all construction to continue. But once that came down, that had an impact. Right now in New York, there's some conflicting information that's out there on whether or not landscaping is essential or not. The Department of Ag and Markets came out last week and said that it was non-essential now for beautification. So we're not really sure how to interpret that. And we're not dictating to our customers whether or not they should be open or not, but we get asked a lot, hey, what are you hearing? Should we be operating? And we just tell them that our function is essential because of what we're doing. Is we've contacted our legal department to make sure that what we're doing is still declared essential. But the landscapers and such and the contractors that are doing construction, they're going to have to make that determination themselves.
Okay, so we're located in the Baltimore, Washington area, so I mean some of our observations are obviously regional for sales, but we had a really good start to the season before everything started. The weather this year was probably the best it's been in several years. The last couple of years we've had polar vortex followed by summer with a very narrow spring season. So in our history of selling this stuff the last 10 years, March is usually our biggest month because we sell to farms, urban farms, community gardens, large buyers of product. And that kind of went away very, very quickly. If you have a community garden and you can't get all your community gardeners together to spread the material, then you're not going to take on the 20 or 40 yard loads and things like that. So we saw that change to a new customer base that we've never really had before. And that's 50% of people that are panic buyers that are trying to hoard compost, but convinced that, the world is ending and our facilities are going to close. And then the other half are bored at home and have always wanted to have a garden or looking for something to do. And so there's this weird dynamic of buyers that we've seen. And so it's been pretty good selling to them. We've had good sales. I think we almost got a little ahead of ourselves last week in selling stuff. But it's the different customers that are maybe a little more high touch, requires a few more emails and calls to hold their hand and help them with the sales. But at the end of the day, the margins on mixed soils and raised bed mixes, things like that are higher. I'm curious to see if those large scale buyers, our farms and schools and things like that, are going to come back this summer or in the fall, or they're just gone for the year, in which case we're having nice high margin sales. But at the end of the day, I also got to move product off my site. So, where's my large bulk sales going to go? So kind of curious to see how the rest of the year plays out in terms of moving quantities, not just moving margin.
Yeah, to build on what Justin said, we do provide, we have different contracts and purchase orders with the schools, and that is the one area where we've seen little tapping on the brakes of getting any of those orders sent right now. But on the municipal side, some of the cities we work with are still keeping their orders coming in, and they've just changed the number of people they have on site to receive the material. Those that are able to are taking it, receiving the material at their holding stations so that they'll have it on site when they are ready to get back to doing the landscape and playground installations. From a sales standpoint at our facilities, building out what Brian and Justin had said, we don't allow customers in our office at this point right now. We have made accommodations at each site so that we have walk-up and drive-up windows. And in addition to that, we have added the plexiglass. So all transactions are simply, like being at the bank, pushing the paperwork back and forth. When we do get very busy in the mornings, some of our sites, we've been able to add a second mobile station outside so that we can split the lines to get people through. We are also engaging and enforcing the social distancing, whether it's with our customers or with our employees. We've also, our sales staff has also stopped making face-to-face calls. Obviously, we implemented that a couple of weeks ago, and all of the business that they are conducting is by phone. We have been able to increase our ability to take delivery and pickup orders by having additional staff on site that are helping us with the phones and email tracking and responding back. So we obviously don't want to lose any sales during this period either. So we can provide curbside pickup for those that don't even want to do the walk-up window. If they want to place their order over the phone with one of our sites, we can. If it's bag material, we can have that ready for them with their receipt. And load them when they come in to pick up the material. As far as delivery options, when we go to the job site or to a homeowner, they don't have to sign the paperwork. So same thing with that, where we're trying to minimize any of those points of contact. Relative to bringing material in, we haven't seen any change yet with the commercial and municipal contracts. As a matter of fact, some of the waste haulers and cities that we work with are seeing an uptick on the residential yard waste collection because more people being home are doing more projects. And from the food waste collection, because we work with a lot of the packaging companies, even though the restaurants have cut off, had to minimize the volume of material or completely cut off what they bring in as far as produce. What we've seen is some of that has shifted over to the grocery. And so, again, those companies are still packaging that material. It just might be going to the grocery chain or somewhere else instead of to Cisco or direct to the restaurant operator. So we haven't seen a change in the food waste that we take in at this point either. I will say one of our municipal contracts, they have decided to suspend yard waste collection for 2 weeks. But in the meantime, the sites that accommodate that contract still remain open for all the other business and landscape and the homeowner business. And I guess the other thing I would say is from a homeowner, we've seen an increase in requests for deliveries, and then also more homeowners wanting to drop off their own yard waste because they're home and they're doing projects.
Yeah, I guess this is Pierce with Dirt Hugger. Pretty similar in our world. We're calling it here is the Eternal Saturday. So it's basically everybody's at home gardening and/or cleaning their garden. So we're currently at 187% of our forecast for product sales. But that's really on the retail side and retail driven. We're in a similar situation. I think Brian mentioned, so all residential and commercial construction has been canceled. So typically this time of the year is when we're hitting that backyard gardener pretty hard. Summer is when the construction happens. So if construction doesn't reopen by then, I think we're going to really see an effect there. The other one is on our farm customers. We're hearing from a lot of them that they're worried about having pickers and being able to get pickers because there may not be a flow of people. So we're going to see some hesitancy out of the farmers for purchasing compost. So while we're seeing this Eternal Saturday uptick in our retail sales, we'll be interested to see how that transitions towards when we hit the construction and the ag season. I did see some questions on protecting, cash and everything like that. So we don't take any cash right now. We have a card swiper that's outside the building, so they don't kind of ever interact. And we really are trying to coach people on holding on to their cards and not even touching the swiper. So those are kind of some of the changes. We've seen a major uptick in deliveries. The other thing to be interesting to see is if this carries, if you see the same trend next year, is it just because people are stuck at home, or is this going to break people into being gardeners for life now? But yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for all those really interesting replies there. One question just came in regard to commercial food service, asking, Hunt Briggs asks, have you seen, as loads of commercial food service have dropped off quickly, have you seen any uptick in food waste from higher up the value chain, such as food manufacturers or food distributors that maybe had other outlets prior to that and have to redirect their perishable inventories?
That's it. I mean, for us, you know, we're the ones taking 50 tons a day of commercial food waste. I haven't seen that push into other areas, and you know, we're an exclusive processor for Vancouver, Washington, and we're just not seeing it. But the interesting thing, and I don't think there's any way for us to measure it, is there a little bit more? There's got to be more food waste in the residential loads, right? So, since people aren't eating at restaurants, I think that food waste is probably there, but it'd be interesting to see what the correlation is between commercial and is it all being pushed in the residential, or are people more parsimonious at home and watching their food waste?
Before we go on to the last question, we had a number of questions come in regard to the last question about operations, especially around PPE. Jack Hoke asked about how are you managing workers' shoes, gloves, clothing, those kind of things. So maybe let each of you, if whoever has something to say about that, speak up.
So most of our sites, we have uniforms. So the employees are wearing their uniforms, and we're sending those out to be laundered more frequently. We're doing, as far as PPE, we've been in pretty good shape. Overall, we've held some phone calls with my whole team, discussed, who has what and where we can share. If one location has an abundance more than and another location's lacking, then we're shipping supplies around. But our biggest issue, like most of the country, are finding proper masks. We have an order in now for enough to help us out for the next, but it's not going to be here for another 2 weeks. So we're getting by with what we have, and doing whatever we need to do, like the rest of America, to use whatever makeshift materials we have to make masks at this point, because we just don't. There's just not enough of them in supply in the around. Not the N95.
Sure. Actually, there was a question for Pierce. He's mentioned Tyler has sewn some masks. Do you want to share your? If you want to share the source of that in the chat box, or send it to me, and I can include that in the on the post webinar email that will go out tomorrow.
Okay, cool. We're doing standard PPE for our pickers. I see a lot of questions on that, right. Which for us is nitrile gloves, dust masks, and then we do these military spec goggles, and it's because our pick line is outside. But this webinar is actually making me start to think about getting some jumpsuits for the pickers, because I did the last USCC webinar talked about clothing. So maybe it'd be time to step that up and get like the full jumpsuits for those people.
Yeah, when we talk about pickers, because again, we're not taking in a lot of the post-consumer. Most of the commercial food that comes in isn't touched by our employees, and if we do have to pull any plastic out, they're in the full regalia, except for what you just mentioned. I mean, maybe we need to consider suit of some sort, but it's so rare that an employee has to really pull any plastic out of those commercial loads. but that's something we can look at. But for right now, I mean, we always enforce having the gloves, the masks, the proper PPE, and making sure that our staff is consistently washing their hands and using, we have at every single station antibacterial supplies as well for our staff.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Here's a little bit about how others have seen sales impacted. Again, the same kind of thing where it's up for some, down for others, retail and wholesale, big differences. So confirming what you're hearing. So kind of the last question from from us, and then we'll continue to take audience questions till about a quarter after the hour. So just a kind of a more general question about what's kind of been the biggest challenges that the COVID pandemic has wrought. And why don't we start the other direction this time? Piers, why don't you go first?
I kind of polled my team about this yesterday too. I mean, one of the biggest ones for us is just communication. You know, we're social people. We kind of like to have meetings and catch people in the hallway. And so I really made a dedicated effort as the owner of the business to step up my communication and using different channels. So, you know, we use Slack internally, but also putting signs up and, you know, posting things all around so that the whole team is getting consistent and very frequent communication, both in terms of what we're doing to protect them and sort of work with them. And then also just to kind of help the staff feel safe and reassured that, you know, we're paying attention to this. We care about their health. We care about their jobs. So stepping up communication. And then secondly, like I was saying on the demand side, you know, and I don't know if this will last, but we hired 5 people in the past 2 weeks. We added an overflow, it's called Ruby Receptionist, but an overflow phone call system so that, because we just can't answer the phones. And so they catch all the extra phone calls. So sort of adapting to this bizarre surge in demand, and then also just trying to keep a hand on the brake if the whole thing drops out, you know, in a couple weeks. So trying to just be adaptable, be flexible, read the right amount of news to not panic, but also just communicate and create the proper safety measures for our team has been the biggest stuff for us.
Laura?
Yeah, and to build on that, I mean, we've really extended our efforts to communicate with our team, our staff members, and then also with our customers. We're sending out communication pieces either by email, social media, and our website, keeping in constant contact with our customers as far as what we're doing at our sites, and then also the options they have to purchase material. And in addition to that, again, reassuring with our staff and making sure we're communicating with them and offering support and making sure they have all the tools they need to be successful and safe at the, you know, at the job site and also at home, you know, giving them tools of what to implement at their own home. And I guess when you say the biggest challenges, I guess the next one is going to be just the unknown. You know, what happens if safer at home, or whatever name you want to call it, depending on the region, as what happens if this goes on for another 30 or 60 days. For right now, we are seeing the consistent orders coming in, but what happens 30 or 60 days, and then people's pay may change, and are they still going to be seeing landscape upgrades and putting a garden in as a priority versus other needs? So that's kind of where we're looking at things for right now.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So, I mean, we haven't really talked much about the financial status and things like that. I mean, we kind of saw this coming a little bit, and we've held back on some of our capital plan to make sure that we're sloshy liquid to make it through this thing. So that was probably our biggest thing, was holding back on some stuff. Not that salesmen weren't trying to sell me some stuff the last couple of weeks to keep their books going. But on the other side, we've been accelerating our maintenance. So, you know, I think I talked earlier about we've had some of our routes aren't as full, so our trucks are coming back earlier. So we have more trucks time in the yard to get maintenance done, doing more facility maintenance and upkeep, cleaning, projects that have been long on the back burner, for doing different things just to A, keep the guys busy, and B, make the most of this time. And let's make progress on our maintenance list while we have the time available. Like others had talked about, really the employees, you know, for us, they're kind of an extension of my family. So making sure they're taken care of and being flexible. So we have some guys doing some weird shifts that work for them and their family care plans. We have one driver who brings along his 8-year-old son. Thankfully, there's no DOT inspections on the roadside right now, so I don't know if that's legal or not, but he's got a ride along and a helper, and that works for him, and then his son's enjoying it. And we're making sure he gets his lunch covered with plenty of lunch money. And then I guess the other part of the business side of things is obviously pending sales, and customers on collection routes are kind of on hold. No one really wants to get started with a compost program right now. While on the other side, our office customers are probably and our corporate campuses are probably our most profitable customers. And that's just almost completely gone. And so that's just been a huge hit to us. Strangely, on the residential side, Pierce had talked about the never ending Saturday. For every customer on the residential side who's canceled service due to hardship, or losing their job or things like that, which is a shame, we've probably seen 2 to 4 customers sign up for everyone we've lost, because people have probably had it on their to-do list for a long time that, hey, I want to start composting, or hey, I got a lot of food waste now that I'm eating at home every day. I feel kind of bad throwing it out. And so we've actually seen a residential uptick in customer signups at this time. So that's what I got.
Interesting.
I would say just because of where we're located, especially where my office is located, and where, focusing on, the New York and tri-state area, it's been a little crazier, and dealing with fears, dealing with employees and their fears has been the most challenging. A lot of employees, their spouses, are questioning and calling and and making sure that that their husband or wife is going to be safe, and that what they're going to bring home. And so that's been challenging, trying to keeping their motivation up, and again, communicating with all of them to understand that what they're doing is essential, and that we need them to continue to operate. We are running, a lot of the, what we do is municipal work, and our municipal clients have sent us notices saying that we are essential. And then adapting when we do have issues. We've had multiple employees that have gone out either with health, self-quarantining, or a spouse has, been tested positive, or someone in their household's tested positive. And, then adapting from there, and that you have to adapt really quickly, and just, okay, who's been exposed, who do we, what do we need to do? How do we need to shut down that particular area where that employee's been, and so that we can sanitize it. And then when you go to bring in somebody off the bench to come in and replace them, you have to convince that employee that you've done everything to protect them. So when you say, hey, you got to get back in that loader, and that guy's wife yesterday tested positive for COVID, that's your employees got to have some trust in you that you did the right thing for them. And then in addition, telling your employees that, we're doing all of these things for you to protect you on the job site. We need you to do the same when you go home. And we've had some issues where particular couple of employees were exposed outside of work, and when they shouldn't have been. And we're doing everything we can, to protect them, and they weren't making the right decisions outside of work. I'd say that those. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that actually relates to one of the questions that just came in. Do your facilities have confirmed case of COVID, and has that affected the morale of the other workers?
Yes, so I think I just touched on that, correct?
Yeah. And has anyone else had any positive cases among their workers?
Living Earth has not.
That's great. Okay. So thank you all for those answers. And so I got a little time left for a few more questions. And I'll start with one for Justin, because you mentioned that you do some vermicomposting. So we had a question get submitted through the form I made available about, someone asked about the vermicomposting industry. Since you don't get to thermophilic composting temperatures, and vermicomposting tends to be more hands-on. Are you still doing it? And if so, have you made any changes on those operations?
So our vermicomposting operation, our goal with that product is to, on a regular day, have a consistent and pathogen-free product. And so what we use in our vermicomposting operation, we use red wigglers, and they get a diet of finely screened compost that's been through PFRP. So it's already been through 30 days of ASP and then screened down. And once it cools off, it goes into the bin. And the only other material that goes in there is for folks who live in the mid-Atlantic or Florida. You may know about Wawa Coffee. So we have a contract to pick up coffee grounds from the store. The way the store is set up, it's only coffee grounds and it's not touched by anyone. It goes right from the brewer right into the bin. And so that's all the worms get. So they don't actually get any raw food scraps or materials like that. And so, based on that procedure we've had in place the last couple of years, we're pretty confident in where we stand. I think for composting in general, and like everyone else has said, I'm on a daily basis, I'm worried about E. coli and salmonella and all kinds of other pathogens. So, while COVID is out there, it's not like we're an industry that isn't already concerned about dealing with pathogens on a daily basis.
And thank you for reminding everyone of that. That's absolutely true. And while the chances of COVID getting transmitted from food waste to worker may be low, and there are plenty of other things to worry about. So I thank you for reminding us. One question that's come in, and Brian, you may be able to answer this one, is about biosolids. Specifically, is there research about, so we know that composting, the temperatures will kill COVID, but what about incoming, sludge class B biosolids? Have you seen research on that?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of research that's out right now by I saw a lot of different articles that were put out by MABA, the Mid-Atlantic Biosolids Association, and NEBRA, which is the New England Biosolids Regional Association. So there's a bunch of papers out there. If you go to their websites, they've got a lot of information on the virus. This is not a new virus, coronavirus. I think COVID-19 is, but coronavirus in general is not new. So there is some research that's been done on biosolids and coronaviruses. So that can be, you can look that up and look into that. But as far as composting is concerned, like I said before, we're certain we're meeting PFRP. So we don't really have any concerns on the back end, the compost product that we're marketing.
Okay, I think the last question is the one, there's been one about kind of contingency plans and capital. And I think Pierce may already have mentioned this, or I guess it was Justin mentioned having some, managing some liquidity differently. Are the others also, can you also speak about liquidity issues, rainy day funds, and how you're maybe planning for contingencies? And this will be our last question.
I could jump in there a little bit. So as a rule of thumb, and we don't always get there, but we try to have 2 months of operating expenses in cash on hand. And that's hard to maintain in the winter. But as we come into the spring, we have that it's called our core capital target, but we try to have that. Another thing, which I'm sure many small business owners are aware, is the PPP, the payroll protection plan. So that's something that's worth looking into, which could help cover your payroll for a couple months if you're experiencing some downturns. But definitely restricting any new capital purchases, trying to tighten the belt, maintaining cash, and just waiting till we get through this is kind of what we're working towards.
Anyone else want to
I
mention
guess,
anything?
so I'll go for a sec. Yeah, I mean, we're monitoring capital closely. But we still have projects that that have to go on. We've had a couple projects that have started in the last 2 months and another one that is starting in the next month, where that was pretty capital intensive. So we have to move forward. We have to provide the necessary equipment in order to just to get those projects off the ground. So, but as far as normal capital replacement schedules, we are looking at those a little bit differently right now, at least for the next couple of months, to see how things play out.
Thank you. And thank you to all our panelists today and for everyone who attended. Just a quick reminder that we do have 2 more coming up on April 14th and April 21st. You can find out all about those on our website. Next week's we'll be focusing on the collection side, especially for small scale community composters, both those managing drop-off sites and those managing curbside collection. And again, the recordings of these webinars will be posted on our site. The ones from last week, and a lot of people had questions about contamination and transmission, and a lot of those were answered. So I encourage you to go ahead and listen to that webinar. The slides are also available there. There won't be any slides from today's webinar, just the intro slides, although if you do want those, I can make those available. And then the last one will be coming up in a couple weeks. And I think with that, we'll just say thank you to everyone for joining us today. And have a great week. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next week.